During the Public Service Recognition Week 2022, we are celebrating 5 of our executive program alumni and wish to gain their insights about leadership. Today, we're happy to feature Michele Daniels, Head Deputy District Attorney for the Airport Branch, Los Angeles County. Michele, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Michele, when your family and friends ask what you do, what do you say?
Usually I say I'm a servant leader. And what I mean by that is I'm a servant to the public, the people of the state of California that I represent in court and as a head deputy here at the Airport Branch. But I'm also a servant for my supervisors, my colleagues, and those I supervise. My purpose as a prosecutor is to help our society treat the harm that happens to others and that's against our laws as if it matters. But it's also to help assure that those who harm others are held accountable. Then the goal and the challenge for me, and I think other supervisors within my office, is to do that in a way that's both fair and just. And that means having compassion for the victims, but also acknowledging the humanity of the defendants we're prosecuting.
How did you get your start in public service?
That's a good question. I'd probably say maybe in elementary school. In elementary school, when at our school, I went to a small parochial school, and one of the things we would do is raise money for children, hungry children outside our own country. So I think that probably was the beginning. I never thought about that before until you just asked me that. But, going forward, my first public service official job was as a student worker, working as a student worker in a court here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, it starts really just boiling it down to those basics, right? Of the values that public service has as a profession, but they're instilled with you very early within your life of giving back and contributing to our communities. That's awesome. How do you think about leadership within this space? So how would you define leadership in public service?
As continually evolving. I think the last 2.5 years have really brought that home. As supervisors, and I can only talk about, my management experience here in the district attorney's office, we've had to adapt greatly, along with the rest of the county, to the changes that were brought by the pandemic. We went from an office where teleworking was virtually unimaginable, I should say, just 3 years ago. But the pandemic convinced, indeed forced all of us to have to transition into a new mode of working just so that people could stay alive and maintain their health. So I think that's really an extreme example of evolution. And now we've learned that not only can we telework for some positions and some work, but we indeed probably should telework. That we can, in some areas, increase productivity by telework. But we've also learned at the same time the importance of human interaction, face-to-face interaction, that there are certain types of development in the workplace that can only take place when you have those face-to-face interactions. For example, building trust, building psychological safety for employees, becoming that mentor who they know they can come to anytime that they need help with difficulties or just advice and guidance. Some of that really requires that human interaction that goes beyond what communication on screens can provide. But even before the pandemic, there's so much development that's constantly going on with technology, with generational change, that it requires me and everybody I work with to be constantly evolving to adapt to those changes. So continuously evolving would be my answer.
Oh, I love that answer. So succinct and memorable and very true when we think about the line of work that we're doing. I want to focus on a couple things that you said. One is this idea around transitions that I want to visit maybe a couple times during our conversation, because you're talking about from an organizational level. And I also recognize that you work within an environment that's public service, and the DA is publicly elected. So by the very nature of your office, there's transitions that take place when you think about the new visions coming into play and implementing it from a policy side. And you also brought this idea around psychological safety. And I'm wondering about the psychological safety piece, if I can ask a question around that first, on how you create that environment within your office, recognizing that there's different types of stress that comes into play in the work that you do, right? So you have the normal organizational stress for being an employee within an organization, and the line of work that you do focus on the representation side of, you're not seeing people at their best effort when you're looking at the clients that are coming through the court system. I'm wondering how you create psychological safety among your team to be able to address all those things that are happening within a workplace environment, including those whom you represent.
I think first it begins, and maybe this is the main way of doing it, is by acknowledging the stresses, the anxieties, the challenges that our work involves, and acknowledging that with subordinates, colleagues, even with supervisors, because that opens the way to being able to have those frank discussions about it, especially when someone is going through something in the office or having a particularly difficult or challenging time. And also with the victims and the witnesses we work with. People who come into the criminal justice system are rarely prepared for it, at least the first time. And when I say those who come into the criminal justice system, I'm talking about as victims, as witnesses. It's a nerve-wracking experience for victims, especially. Usually we're encountering them, if not on the worst day of their life, one of the worst days of their lives. So part of what we have to do as prosecutors is put on different hats. Yes, we're a prosecutor, but to some extent, we're also a therapist, a social worker. We're a source of resources for the witnesses and victims we deal with to try to put them at ease while they're going through the stress, the challenge, the nervousness of going through this process. We're an informational source to let them know what that process is going to be like, so that as much as one can be calm and collected when they're going through what is inherently somewhat of a nerve-wracking experience, we can help make that as calm as possible for them.
When you're thinking about working with your team in particular, they're interfacing with those individuals you just identified. When you think about it from an organizational structure perspective, how have you thought about what's been similar or different because of the different protocols we're bringing in because of COVID?
What has been similar is the focus on us acting together, supporting one another, putting the health, the welfare of the team, the group, ahead of any one individual for the safety and health of all. I think that's what easily comes to mind. What's been different, besides that now we have new modes of communication, like this, virtual communication and teleworking, has been that there's been changes in who comes into the office, who doesn't come into the office. And so there's less opportunities for that face-to-face interaction and observation in this new work world that we had before the pandemic. And so we have to find new ways of reaching out and trying to build that trust, especially with people who either are not in the office because their job now keeps them away. They're more often teleworking, or they can't be in the office and they would prefer to be in the office and are quite frankly missing that personal interaction, that face-to-face mentoring, collegiality that they would otherwise have here. And I think that's a transition we're still going through, learning how to connect with the folks who are outside at our office while also incorporating them into those of us who are in the office and continuing those linkages. So we still have a strong sense of team identity in the work that we have to do, because the work here relies so much on supporting one another. One prosecutor, for example, might be ill. Another prosecutor is going to have to suddenly come in unexpectedly and take over their case for them. Well, that case is not just a written document. That case is actually the people who are involved in it, the victims, the witnesses, the detectives, who now a new prosecutor has to get to know. And so that's going to require a team that has such support for one another that when that kind of call comes, especially while we're being short-staffed, that they're ready to respond. And they're ready to respond and do it with enthusiasm when there's still that sense of we're all here together. We're all here for a similar purpose.
When you're talking about creating that environment, I can only imagine that the challenges that you had faced of getting into that space where we're able to interact with each other face to face and build up those relationships. What have you seen or attribute as a success from your efforts?
That's a hard question for me, because I think I measure successes now in small steps. The successes I see are when the members of my team, our team, feel comfortable enough to come in and talk about the difficult situations, whether they be situations that have to do with their case, their prosecution, their work schedule, their interactions with some other agencies. Those are the ways that I'm measuring success mainly now. A couple of years ago, one of the ways that I was measuring it during the pandemic was the development of peer support for one another. And that's when I was in victim services. And that seemed to be something that our group in victim services very much valued. The development of a peer support system for one another and knowing that it was supported by the administration, them building a peer support group. Here, now that I'm back on the other side, the prosecution side of cases, interestingly enough, I'm also involved in development of a peer support program. And so far where we've gotten with that is in the development of a wellness program for all of us. We realize that so many of the issues faced by those in our office now, post-pandemic, really have to do with stress, working under new conditions, still dealing with the pandemic, and wanted to create a space where members of the office could come, not to talk about work, but just a place that's safe to talk about and learn about resources for drawing on inner strength and developing resilience during the tough health and economic times that we're in now.
What I'm appreciating from our short conversation today is how you focus on the individual, focus on the relationships. I've also recognized you have this huge outcome, right? This whole huge work performance that you have to do, but just by the very nature of your job and how important it is. And I know that there's certain things that are the legal side of public service that others might not face when you're talking about certain deadlines or just hard deadlines, and you're talking about relationships and moving things through the court system. Certainly all those things come into play as maybe outcomes of the work that you're doing. But when you're talking about the organizational design structure, you're really getting to the heart of the individual's role within it and how we can be a resource for each other. How have you gone about creating that culture within your new position?
In one way, by sharing the development of the wellness program with the colleagues and staff I work with here. Also, trying to get to know individually each of the people I'm now supervising, which I've been here now basically almost 5 months. So it's pretty new. And I've spent much of that time trying to get to know the individuals. As you say, yes, the approach I talk about is very much individual based, because what is our organization but made up of a group of individuals? Sharing with them, as I said, the concept that yes, our work is vitally important, but also they are vitally important. And we can't do any of this work without them, and without them feeling as best they can on any given day so that they can give their best while they're here doing their work. Similarly, and I'm not sure if this is directly responsive to your question, but as part of the wellness program, it requires interfacing with other parts of our office, interacting with people from our Bureau of Investigations, with our ethics coordinator, with other DAs who are working in overseeing different departments in our office. So it's brought not just me, but brought those we supervise into a circle that maybe we wouldn't otherwise be in if we weren't collaborating with one another. So by collaborating with others throughout the office on a project that is goal is to uplift the wellness of everyone in the office, we're having an impact, I think, on many individuals in the office, but ultimately on the office as a whole.
I appreciate those perspectives. It just gets to the humanness of the work that we're doing and recognizing that all organizations are human systems that we created and have a role to play in it. I want to ask a question about just the type of the organization that you work within, and recognizing that while it's a public service organization, it's structured in some ways very similar to other public service organizations when we think about the hierarchy and divisions and the outreach to members of our community and society. And it's very distinct in other ways, including having the district attorney publicly elected. So that's the person that leads your organization. Can you share some insights on what it's like working within an organization that's headed by a publicly elected official?
Well, I think now that I've worked under approximately 6 such publicly elected officials, I can say that I noticed 2 things. One, that the type of work that we do is very similar despite who is at the top. And this goes back again to, as prosecutors, treating the harm that happens to others, and also helping assure that those who harm others are held accountable. But with each political and new leader, there are different policies that are highlighted. So what the change tends to be is in what particular policies perhaps that new leader may endorse. But in terms of, when people think political, well, does that mean, for example, you have to be a certain political persuasion in order to be successful in our office? It doesn't work that way. While the district attorney is elected, people of all kinds of political positions work in our office and succeed working here every day. So it's not political in that sense. But to the extent our new leader brings new policies, then we also take on a steward role where we're responsible for making sure that the rules, the policies are followed, but also those of us in supervising and management positions, part of our responsibility is also to give feedback to our managers and let them know what's working, what's not working. And that's a constant that I've seen throughout my tenure here in the district attorney's office.
When you think about that type of feedback, does it come naturally within the organization?
I think it comes naturally for some people more than others. If that's what you mean, is it easy to give that sort of feedback? I think it's necessary in every organization, and that strong leadership welcomes that sort of feedback, because we need to know what is helping, what's harming our ability to carry out our mandate, our jobs as prosecutors. And that I think for the most part, yes, it can sometimes be difficult, sometimes not, but nevertheless, it has to be given.
What motivates you to do the work that you do?
Love. I think I'm one of those people. I've been fortunate that I still pinch myself some days, that this is a job that not only that I was able to choose and I got chosen for, but I get paid to do it as well. Love of people, love of this city, love of this county. And I do love the servant mode. The leadership, I think, probably comes a little less naturally to me than the service. Helping others and going home knowing that I've helped someone at the end of the day is probably the most rewarding thing. But also seeing, for example, the new folks who come into our office. When I say the new folks, I'm talking about the new staff, prosecutors, as well as support staff, secretaries, paralegals, helping them learn, watching them learn. I think I cheat a little bit because their energy feeds me and reinvigorates me. I feel I have information that I can share, experience I can share, but I also love learning from them at the same time, because a lot, especially the new attorneys, new staff who come in. I wasn't a technological whiz when I joined the office. Many of them are, and I have no shame in asking them, having them teach me how to do something from time to time. At the same time, I think they appreciate the knowledge, if not wisdom, that age brings along. And, you know, they'll call upon me to share that. And that gives me one of the greatest pleasures, I think, in this office. I still enjoy that I can still get up in the morning smiling, wanting to hurry in to work, and just enjoying the sharing of information, the sharing of expertise, and the sharing of experience with those who I work with.
Oh man, that's great. I'd love the love. I wish we were closer. I'd rather be in an office with you than being so far away from you. One last question about advice. What advice do you have for those of us in public service?
Keep doing it. We need you. And if you can, if you approach it with love. I think a lot of times people don't think about work as something that you can bring love to. But I think that our coworkers, I think those we supervise, I think our managers, they can tell what we're feeling. And we're living in such turbulent times right now. Economically, we still have a pandemic that we're facing, although it seems to be doing a little less harm to people than maybe a year ago, thank goodness. To the extent we can bring a spirit where we try to uplift one another through our service, it's sorely needed right now.
Michele, thanks for all that you do as you advance excellence in public service and model, inspire, and lead the way. Thanks, Michele. It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, Paul. Thanks for having me.